Welcome to Pivot Points, a new series featuring some of the world's most successful women, candidly sharing their stories and insights about how they made it to the top and how you can too. Hosted by Perry Yeatman, a straight-talking global executive and award-winning author who created the career and life of her dreams and now wants to help other ambitious women do the same.
Welcome. This is Perry Yeatman, host of Pivot Points. And my next guest, I'm so excited to introduce her to you. She is the president of Kellogg's 4 billion, that's with a B, snack unit, which is home to some of the nation's favorite brands, including Pringles, Keebler, and Cheez-Its. Before joining Kellogg, she was the CMO at Kraft Foods. Kraft is, of course, where we met. For more than 25 years, she's built a career spanning Quaker, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Kraft, and now Kellogg. Seriously, few people have a better consumer products pedigree in both domestic and international geographies. When I think of her, I think of 3 key words: dynamic, decisive, strategic. She is a leader with moxie that people love to follow. Her name is Deanie Elsner, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce her today. Deanie, welcome.
Thank you, Perry. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad you could make time for us. So, obviously, you right now are running a $4 billion business for, as I said, some of America's favorite brands. You didn't start there. So let's go back a little bit. And could you tell us what job was it or what opportunity was it that really kind of launched your career?
Absolutely. I've been at Kellogg for just over a year. Prior to that, Kraft Foods for about 23 years. But if I go back to the job that I would contend, people to this day continue to go back and say, wow, I can't believe you started there. The one that launched me is I started my career with Procter & Gamble right out of undergrad. I went to undergrad at the University of Arizona over in Tucson, and I double majored. I had a major in marketing and general business. As I came out of Arizona, I knew marketing was ultimately what I wanted to do, but it was hard to break into marketing without an MBA. So the next best thing was to go into sales with Procter. I was hired, and months after I graduated, I started in sales with Procter & Gamble in Northern California. I was there for about 3.5 years, and at that point, my dad had fallen ill, and I came back and helped him run his business. But those 3.5 years for me were the launch years because I joined a company that to this day is an iconic company known for its reputation in training good general managers, really fundamental skills, and a leader in the marketplace. And then I was surrounded by professionals. And so, as a kid coming out of undergrad, you don't really know how to act. You don't really know how to be this grown up. And I learned a lot from the people that I was both reporting to and the people that I was surrounded by. My first manager there was Bill Kavanaugh, and he took a personal interest in helping me develop. And to this day, I would contend that sales experience is still experience I utilize as I present to Wall Street, whether I present to the board or internally to senior meetings. It is knowing how to think on my feet, knowing how to react to difficult situations, and knowing how to make the close to a sale is ultimately what I continue to draw on.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because before I actually got my first professional opportunity, that summer after undergrad, I was like you. I was not a business major. I was actually a lit major, even further away, and I sold cutlery door to door, like literally door to door sales. And people, yes, they do exactly what you just did. They laugh heartily when they hear that. But I got to tell you, my Lord, I made thousands of dollars selling
I'm sure.
knives. And that experience has stayed with me to this day because I'm truly fearless in walking up to somebody and talking to them because it's like if you can knock on a stranger's door and sell knives, then you can do just about anything.
No, I think it's true. And I think people underestimate really talented and successful salespeople are incredibly bright. They are strategic about how they approach a situation, and they really cannot be outmaneuvered. I mean, it's masterful to see, and it's a fantastic experience. I'm a big supporter of that kind of a step as a first career step.
So let me ask you, because I'm talking to a lot of women, and a lot of women who are recent grads are listening to the program. What was it you think that you did that made you stand out coming out of Arizona to land a job with P&G? Because even back then, those had to be quite competitive to get.
Well, it was, and I'll have to tell you, for whatever reason, at that time, there was not a lot of people around me who were aggressively interviewing on the business circuit, and I'm not really, in hindsight, not really quite sure why. But it was really, it was my dad. I grew up in a family of 6 kids, 5 girls and a boy, and the only rule my parents had in going to college was we could go anywhere but in the state that we had grown up in. My dad was adamant that we were all going to go out and get our own legs and test our skills at being independent. And so there was never a question in our household growing up that, you were going to launch coming out of college. And you were going to jump into a career. So as I jumped into the interview circuit at Arizona, it was having come off of an undergrad career where I had been, the president of my sorority. I had been involved in student senate. I had been doing some philanthropic work, and so I had differentiating experience to draw from. Mm-hmm. But importantly, when I interviewed, I'd grown up in a house of a lot of loud women and a lot of people who knew how to position an argument. And so I just was able to walk in and make the sale. And it was a good sale because it really, it was a perfect launching pad. And when you ask that question, there's just no question that was it.
So that's how you got your start. A few years later, you're at the mid-career. And I know that you, like me, actually waited a bit longer than perhaps the average to have children. But I know you do have at least a daughter now.
Yes.
And I know she is, as mine is, the light of your life.
Yes.
But it's not always easy. In fact, let's be honest, it's never easy juggling a child and a career. And so my question is, as you took on responsibility for child rearing and then potentially, caregiving on the other end, also with aging parents, what choices or compromises did you have to make, and how did you make it work for you?
It's a great question because I think it's one every woman, and regardless of whether you choose to get married or not, have kids or not, you are in a position where just by definition you are juggling more than your male counterpart. And you're right, it is either aging parents or it is sisters and brothers or it's kids or it's a spouse. It's just there's always that extra part, and it's just part of who we are and how our role in life has been cast. And so you do have to make trade-offs. I think one of the biggest insights I've gained along the way in terms of how you make them and then how to direct those is be clear about what your destination is. Be clear about where you're going ultimately in your life. And it sounds like a big call to action. I think everybody's got to step back and say, when all this stuff is over, and eventually it will all be over, what is it that I want to step back and say I accomplished? And if you are committed to your career, you will have career success. You will have that logged up. But for me, it really was having kids. So first and foremost, I kind of spent about 5 years in sales and decided pretty quickly it's not where I wanted to be. I went back and got my MBA at the University of Chicago and then started my career in marketing with Kraft in Chicago. And, probably about 9, 10 years, 11 years into that career with Kraft, I was about that mid-career point, and really I was late 30s and trying to figure out what the next step was. Mm-hmm. And when I stepped back and kind of figured out what my destination was, it was very clear to me that if I ended this life not having kids, I would be really sorry about that. Mm-hmm. And so not having been married at the time and no potential suitors, I made the decision to have a baby and have her on my own. Now, that was a big pivot point for me because mid-career, it's tough to make that decision as a single parent because you never know quite what your company is going to think about that and whether they're going to support that or not. I had some really sage advice from a gentleman, and you'll know him, Tom Boyd, up at Oscar Mayer at the time. I went in and talked to him. He was the head of HR. And we sat down and had a coffee, and I just said, hey, Tom, here's what I'm thinking, and give me some feedback about what Kraft will think about this kind of a commitment, and will it stunt my career at all, and what do you think about it? And without even blinking, he looked at me and he said, Deanie, let me put it to you this way. Why do you care? And I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that answer. And I kind of smiled, and he said, honestly, if what you want to do is have kids, you should never care about what an employer thinks about that decision, because it's ultimately your decision. And if this is not the place for you, then you will find the place that will better support that decision. But don't stray from that destination. And it was wonderful advice, because there was really no time within the Kraft Foods organization where I felt making that decision derailed or impacted negatively my career at all. Now, having made the decision, I will tell you, I had to juggle more, and I had to balance more, and I had to find the support, and I had to ensure that if I had a career that was demanding and required some travel, that I had that network set up. But for me, that was kind of the mid-career decision that I had made, and like you, have never looked back at having my daughter. She's now 13, a year from high school, and this is a kid who, by the age 7, had spent more of her time living abroad than living in the U.S. At one point, told us, school of kids that she was born in London. I mean, she had no idea that she was an American. So I'm really proud of that decision. I'm proud of what I've been able to juggle, take on, and succeed with having made that decision. And I wouldn't change one part of it. It's been hard, but I think being married and have kids is hard, because you're dealing with two careers at that point. So there's not a lot in life that is an easy way to go. But I'm very, very glad I made that decision. And, the clarity of that decision came when I made the decision that long term, if I hadn't had kids, that would be a really bad part of my life. And so from there, the rest of my decisions were made.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I don't know that many single moms who have done as well as you have. And I think it's really inspirational that your clarity, and then you were able to get support, but you were also prepared to walk away if you needed to. I think that's really important, because I personally feel exactly the way you do. I was given a lecture at Georgetown University last night with a bunch of students, and I said, if that's something that matters to you, male or female, if it matters to you, never give it up. Absolutely,
you
positively, don't give it up. And whatever you have to trade for that, it will be worthwhile. Now, there are people who don't want kids, and that's also a completely fine answer. I'm not telling anybody who doesn't think they want kids that they should have kids. But for me, for you, for many people I know, it has been, I love my work, but it has been the most meaningful, the best job ever, I always say, is being a mom. And I
think so. But it is funny, Perry. I think a lot about, and I mentor a lot of women in my career, and the interesting thing for me about women is, put the kid thing aside, because you're right, there's a lot of women who've said, I don't really want kids. It's not the definition of success. It was part of the definition of my life success. But when you think about women, the one thing that is always surprising me about women is by definition, we juggle a lot, right? Regardless of what relationship or family situation you're in, you juggle a lot. But women tend to be really clear about, when I'm 27, I'm going to get married, and when I'm 35, I'm going to have this career, and when I'm 38, I'm going to be by the pool in the country club, and then I'm going to go back to work. And it's so clear where you're going to be and how you're going to be. And I'll tell you, the one piece of advice I would give anybody in this space is let life play out. Be open to the opportunities. Be open to things you didn't anticipate, and let it play out, because more often than not, it is our vision of what we thought was going to be, how the life played out, that gets in the way of how it could play out. And inevitably, those decisions, that come when opportunities at the door knocking, when you think, God, there's no way I would ever do that. In my career, the 2 or 3 times that I have taken that leap have been the 2 or 3 most impactful or most career advancing points in my career. Now, I knew I always wanted to be in Chicago, and I knew I always wanted to have kids, but knowing that anchored my decisions and enabled me to kind of weave a decision path that has brought me ultimately back to Chicago. but it's been a little bit more of an exploratory. And I think knowing that was ultimately the end goal enabled me to take steps that I probably wouldn't have taken. And they were all fantastic steps in terms of advancing my career and expanding my personal experience set.
Yep. Yeah. I always tell people having a plan is really important, but never fall too much in love with your plan, because the truth is it will never happen that way. Like I was trying to get to Europe. I ended up in Singapore. I was trying to, it's like, it doesn't matter. Like I was dating one man. I moved home to the States to marry him. I ended up marrying another guy, right? It's like, so you have a plan, it's pretty good. But, even what I'd always warn my parents is I said, if I'm still 40 and single, I just want to put you on notice now. I'm going to have kids on my own. I actually had said, I'm going to do exactly what you ended up doing, Deanie. And
absolutely did the same thing.
Exactly. At 38, I got my husband and I got pregnant, and it was like, oh, okay. So I beat my time frame. I had my daughter at 39, right? But it was so funny. So I think you're right. I think life is, in the unexpectedness of life, I guess, is what really stressed me out when I was younger, and what I now recognize every one of the most amazing growth opportunities and really deep experiences I had were unexpected. And so
absolutely agree.
The plan is great. Have a direction, have a basic idea. Yes, I want a family, or yes, I want to be in Chicago or whatever. But then the rest of it is like, boy, just go with the flow, because you're going to be amazed where you end up.
Yep, absolutely agree.
Well, actually, you've almost kind of talked about transitions. I think the one thing I'd want to continue to dig into a little bit more is, even really confident, capable women like you can feel nervous or unsettled when they make a big transition. And so my question is, how did you actually deal with that uncertainty? Like, what was the thought process you went through that gave you the confidence to say, I'm just going to go for this? Like, can you walk us through that a little bit? Because I know there's a lot of women trying to do it, particularly creating a second act. And they're like, wow, they're frozen. They're really capable people, but they're frozen right now because they got out of what they did do, and now they don't know what to do next.
Yeah, you know what? It's an excellent question, because anybody who tells you that any job they take, regardless of what that job is, they have 100% confidence and they don't feel some level of insecurity is absolutely lying. And I will tell you, literally, every job I've had in probably the last 7 or 8 jobs, so it goes pretty far back in my career, every time I've walked into that job, there has been that little voice that has said, ooh, is this going to be the job that knocks you off, the pedestal? Is this the one where they realize that you're a fraud, or that you really didn't earn your way there, or that, you didn't really succeed? And so there's not a job I've had where I've walked in and said, oh, this is it. I've got it down pat. What I have gotten a heck of a lot better at is, what is the playbook when I come into a new job? How do I acclimate myself to the environment? How do I get to know the team? How do I identify very quickly who the players are that can make things happen? Who are the players that don't seem to be doing as much? And literally now, there is a playbook I have when I walk in, which is, assess the situation, confirm or build what the strategy long-term is for the business, ensure you've got the right structure in place to deliver against those plans, get the right team and the right players in place. I am a big believer in diversity, not because I'm a woman, because I've been a part of 4 different turnarounds on 4 different businesses. I'm in my 5th one as we speak. And what I have found is, when you build these teams, the best success I've had is by building teams that are diverse in terms of gender, culture, in terms of education, and frankly, style, introverts and extroverts. Because when you build that team right, that's the team that will ask the right questions. They will put the right stuff on the table. They will challenge each other, and they will cover each other's backs. A good team is like a puzzle. If you get the pieces right, the thing hums. And so the playbook I walk into any situation now gives me the confidence that I will get this thing figured out, because I will surround myself with the smartest team, the best players, and the people who will do their jobs to get it done. And for me, that is why, frankly, I came back to work on what I think will be my last turnaround, because I wanted one more under my belt. I like walking into businesses that are not performing. I like disrupting teams. I like figuring out how to pull things together and how to get things back on the right track. And inevitably it comes down to being clear about the destination, getting the right strategy in place, getting the right structure, and then getting that team in place and asking a million questions. So anybody who tells you that they never feel insecure, they never question themselves, that's not a human being. That is not a real person.
That's so interesting that you say that, Deanie, because I think you're absolutely right. It is about a playbook, and I think that it was interesting. One of my guests earlier said, if a woman can't, or any successful professional can't ultimately tell you immediately what their top 5 failures were, then they really just haven't succeeded, because they said, or they're lying, because
they're lying.
Exactly.
Because you've got them every single day. Absolutely agree.
Exactly. And it's just about learning how to pick yourself up and everything else, like you talked about, having a playbook. So one of the things that we would be curious about, because as I said, every woman has had these, and yet we don't talk about them very often. And so clearly, since the bad breaks or the unacceptable behavior or whatever, it didn't derail you on the way to the top. Would you be willing to share one of the most difficult or outrageous things that's happened to you, and how did you handle it?
Yes, I'd be willing to share with you. I don't know how this will play, but I'll give you potentially one of the more outrageous ones, because it's in hindsight kind of a funny story, and I'm a little surprised that I acted the way I did, but it happened. So my first job when I went abroad was into a staff role. So I'd grown up at Kraft in P&L, general management kind of roles, grown up in marketing. And when I had gotten to kind of a senior director level, I had the opportunity to go abroad into a staff job. Now, growing up in marketing within a CPG environment is kind of the desirable track in terms of ultimately marketers are what get pulled to run the bigger businesses down the road. So going to a staff job is a questionable opportunity, and I had been in different positions, and at this point had Delaney. She was about 2 years old. So just as I was getting promoted to this VP position, I went into my boss's office, and he said, "Great news, you're getting promoted, and the job's in Europe." And I looked at him, I'm like, "Europe? What are you talking about?" He's like, specifically London. I'm like, "London? Good heavens." At this point, I'm a single parent. I've got a 2-year-old. Granted, when you go abroad, one of the downsides of those jobs is you travel a lot. And I really stewed on the offer because, knowing that I was a new parent, and then I would have to go into a foreign country and bring my daughter and then travel on top of that. I thought, oh man, what am I doing? And 3 or 4 days I thought about it. I came back and I said, fine, I'll take the job, because ultimately they had nannies in London, and technically the world of Mary Poppins could play out in my mind. And ultimately the worst thing that could possibly happen, of course, was that I got fired. And if it didn't work out, I'd come back and figure out something else. So I thought the downside was relatively limited, and the upside was, going abroad and ultimately potentially getting into a P&L, running a business abroad would be kind of a cool thing. So I took the staff job. I got abroad. I walked into my first meeting in the London offices, and I walked into a room that was filled with 28 men, 28 white men. And I thought to myself, what in the heck have I gotten myself into? Like, was this not a very smart move? And so it was kind of interesting being dropped in as a woman at that level, and then being in an environment where there just were no other people like you at those levels. And I remember one night the CEO of Kraft came into town, and the executive team got everybody together, and we all went out to dinner. And of course, I was the only woman at this dinner, and it was a group of 25, 35 people, and we'd had this big dinner. Well, towards the end of dinner, the waitress came over to me and said, are you ready? Are you ready to go? And I said, we're leaving in a couple minutes. And she said, no, should we give you the check? And I'm like, oh no, I'm not the one in charge. And I pointed to, at the time, the CEO of Kraft, and I said, he's in charge. He gets the check. And she said, no, aren't you the secretary?
Secretary. Oh.
And I looked at her, and like my first reaction was, you got to be kidding. But then I looked around and I was like, well, of course she thinks the only woman in this dinner is the one who's the lowest ranking. And so I said, no, I'm not. That's the CEO. You can bring it over to him. And as we were walking out of the restaurant, a couple of my peers were kind of walking out with me and towards the back of the group, laughing about how embarrassing that was and how funny they thought that was. And one of them said, ha ha, Deanie, you're a token woman. You're the token woman in our group. The only thing that would make you more valuable is if you were black.
Oh my
and I
heavens.
looked at him.
Oh my goodness.
And I didn't even know what to do. I looked at him and I
What's
thought,
there to say?
okay, I'm in a different culture, so maybe that's funny here, but it's not really funny. And I thought, oh my God, so I'm walking out. And so I don't sleep all night because I am so irritated about, that. And you kind of know in different environments at different levels, when there's just kind of some chatter going on. And you know what? For the most part, I would tell any woman, just ignore it, perform, let your numbers speak for you, let your results talk. But, I sat on it for about a day, and I thought, it's just not acceptable because this isn't about me. This is about all the women who are going to come after me. It's not the right environment. And so I sat down. I took my time to document kind of the whole situation and schedule an appointment with the head of HR. And I walked into his office, and so he was an American. And I walked into his office and sat down and grabbed a coffee with him. I said, look, he explained the situation to him. He was aghast. His mouth was wide open. And I said, I'm going to take care of this myself, so I don't want you to intervene one iota. But let me be really clear. If this cannot get addressed and if I cannot overcome this, I will be taking this further. So just I'm documenting that it's happened. I don't want you to do one thing about it. I will handle this, but I am not going to put up with this because life is too short. My career's too long, and this is not going to be an environment that is going to work for me nor for anybody else if we can't figure out how to get better. 9 months later, I was promoted into his job, and 2 years later, we turned around the business. And so it's just kind of funny that things ultimately turn out, but you can't buckle when life kind of serves you up a bunch of lemons because you have to act, you have to push forward for the women who are coming behind you, and frankly for the men who are slightly different coming behind you too, because the path has to be carved. But you also get to have a voice in, I'm not going to tolerate it. I'll deal with this, but I'm not going to tolerate it. And I look back at it and I say to myself, in hindsight, I handled it maturely. It's not how I felt. I was angry. I was irritated. I was pissed off. But I think I handled it the right way, and ultimately it worked out.
Yeah, I would say you did, and I wish I could say I never had experiences like that, but as you know, it's like
you couldn't be as successful as you've been. Of course, you've had experiences like that. Exactly. Of course, you have, and it's not what defines you. How you react is the thing that defines you, and obviously you've done it right, and that's what it's all about.
Yep, well said, well said. Okay, so now we're into the fun round. I just have a couple quick questions that are not directly related to career advice, but I just think are fun and insightful for people. So if you had one word you would use to describe your professional path so far, what would it be and why?
One word, unpredictable.
Okay.
And potentially disruptive, because I've taken jobs that have taken me far out of my comfort zone, that were so not on my radar screen in terms of what I thought I was going to do. I knew I ultimately wanted to get abroad and run a business abroad. I knew that I wanted to get at some point to a CMO role. I knew that I wanted to run businesses. I wasn't really specific about the path those things would take. And by taking advantage of the opportunities that were presented, it was an unpredictable path, but I wouldn't change it because it's just been so fun, and it has expanded my horizons, and it's who I am today. So probably unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. That's a great word. So who inspires you? Either who has inspired you, who does inspire you?
Probably the person who has inspired me is probably my dad. He was always business-minded. He was always incredibly focused on raising independent daughters, and really, at the end of the day, family was everything, and was really committed to, you've got, you're your brothers and sisters' keepers. Who inspires me today is my daughter, and a funny story is while I was CMO at Kraft, was when Warren Buffett and 3G decided to buy Kraft, and swiftly wiped out the executive team, and I was part of that shrapnel, and I had never really been fired in my life. That was kind of an interesting thing, and both humbling as well as you're inevitably, it's going to happen. And I went home, and I was in a small community on the North Shore of Chicago, and I knew it was going to hit in the papers the next day, and I knew I was going to have to tell Delaney about what happened and kind of put her mind at ease, because the kids were going to be talking about it at that point. She was in 6th grade. And so I sat down and talked to her and said, look, this is going to come out tomorrow. Just want you to know, I got fired today. This is why it happened. New people own the company, and kind of went through the whole story. And, she was like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. For her, it was like, oh, you poor thing. It never occurred to her that this was we, right? Because we got fired because we live together. That means whatever happens to me, it happens to you. But as I'm trying to calm her, she's like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. What are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. That's the best part of what's in front of me now. I don't know what I'm going to do, but what should I do next in my career? I guess I have to think about that. And she said, I know, Mama. I know you've always talked about, maybe you should have gone into medicine. Maybe you should be maybe you should have been a surgeon. I've got a great idea. Why don't you become a surgeon? And I said, that is really a great idea. Delaney, what's 52 plus 8? And she said, 60. And I said, exactly, that's how old I would be if I went to medical school and into my residency for 4 years, which means I would be a 60-year-old brand new surgeon. And people really don't like 60-year-olds operating on them, so that's probably not going to work. And she's like, ooh, you're right. What about a vet? And I said, very similar. She's like, well, you could be a dog groomer. I said, yep, I could be, but I'm allergic to dogs and cats, and that probably wouldn't work. So we kind of eventually got down to, be a teacher. I'm like, well, now you might be on to something. We'll see what's next. But, it's that kind of, don't let this bother you, kind of go on to the next thing. Literally, Perry, 2 days later, I'm walking her to the school bus because, of course, now I've got free time to walk her to the school bus. And I've got her hand, and we're laughing, and she's like, will you not be so silly? Because, of course, at that age, it's 6th grade. Kids don't really like that. And I said, Delaney, what do you do when life gives you, a bowl of lemons? And she said, you make orange juice. And I go, you make orange juice? What are you talking about? And she said, Mom, if you make lemonade, that's totally predictable. You make orange juice so that everyone always wonders what's coming next. And that's, it's just, because you've got a daughter. I mean,
Beautiful.
That's the
Beautiful.
best part. It's just, that's what inspires me. It's that silly perspective of, hey, this is what it's all about. This life is not really that serious, and there's other things out there that inspire you. So anyway.
I love that story. That is just so awesome. And I'll give you a really short one in return. So my daughter was probably about 4 or 5, and I was driving downtown to the Shed Aquarium, and I was working at Kraft, and I thought, oh God, I don't get to spend enough time with her, and am I doing a good job, and whatever. And so out of, on the radio, I always listen to NPR. So then on NPR, there's this notice, and it's the first time Hillary's running, right? And they're talking about her on the news as potentially being the first female president. And out of the back seat from the little booster seat, because she's still that size, she's like, "Oh, Mommy, I hope Hillary doesn't win." And I'm like, and I'm thinking,
hold on.
Exactly. I'm like, I'm about to drive the car off of, Lakeshore Drive, thinking I have completely failed. What is going on? And so I'm trying to be calm. And I said, "So, honey," I said, why do you not want Hillary to win? Don't you think it'd be good to be, have a female president? And she goes, "Mommy, I want to be the first female president." Or she said, "Or at least it should be you." So she said, "Why do we need Hillary?"
You're like, success.
Exactly.
I succeeded.
And then that's exactly what I thought. I thought, first of all, you just made my day. Second of all, I went from within, a split second, I went from thinking I am the worst mother in the world to eureka, whatever I've done has not been a complete failure, right? So I just, they
clone me
every day. Exactly. So awesome. On the inspiration topic, if you could have a superpower roundtable with 3 women, alive or dead, who would they be and why?
Oh, that is a very okay. I'll choose 3, but I'll pitch in a couple of others that I think would just be dang funny. Probably the 3 is going to sound it's going to sound odd. Eleanor Roosevelt would probably be one of them, because she was just a woman before her time, and she had an agenda. She pushed things forward. It was at a time when there was a great need, but not such as great of an acknowledgement of a woman's thinking, and she figured out how to have a tremendous hand in creating our history. A second one would be Rosa Parks. I've always been drawn to her courage and just her fortitude to say no. Enough is enough, and I imagine she would be fascinating to sit down and get a perspective from. And then I'm just a huge fan of Oprah Winfrey. I think she's funny. I think she's sharp. I think she is a brilliant entrepreneur. I think she's driven, and I think she'd be fun to hang out with. All of that said, there's no comedy at that table. Tina Fey would be absolutely outrageous. Sandra Day O'Connor, I just have tremendous respect for. And so that it would be among those people, I would guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like a very fun table, and I would love to be a mouse in the corner. So if you ever get there, let me know.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we're on our last words on this, and it's a couple questions, and you can answer it any way you want. But one I'm always interested in, if you could do it all again, what advice would you give your younger self? Or what's the best piece of career advice you ever got?
Okay, that's a good question. What advice would I give my younger self? Slow down. It's going to work out. I think early in my career and into my mid-career, I put a lot of hours in, and because I wanted to succeed, and that was good and that was helpful. I probably put too many hours in, and there was probably more opportunity to expand and grow personally. And I think that would be a good piece of advice. Turn it down a little bit and enjoy more of the ride. What's the best piece of career advice I got? I remember sitting and talking to the sales director on one of my businesses when I was at Kraft, and it was during a period where a number of people were being asked to leave the organization for performance issues, and there were some surprises in some of the folks that were being asked, and it shook me because it never occurred to me. I think this generation is so much smarter and so much more savvy, and frankly, they don't think about having a career for life. They think about career in terms of foundational experiential steps to expand their broader horizon, while we were still thinking, oh no, I can get all that done at one company. But I was in that phase, and I remember walking into this gentleman's office and saying, God, it's I can't believe that person got fired. I can't believe he's gone, and it was that quick. And he kind of sat me down, closed the door, and he said, let me share a piece of advice with you that I hope you'll carry on with you for a long time. He said, I don't care who you are, and I don't care where you go. if you are successful, and I expect that you will be successful in your career, at some point you will reach a height where you too will be tapped on the shoulder by the little men in the white jackets and asked to walk out the door. Because somewhere, somehow, some way, you're going to piss somebody off, and they're not going to want you around anymore. And so you have to change your mindset to being scared of that thing happening, to doing what's right to get the results you need to get, and being prepared for the consequences of what happens when you succeed. And you cannot be driven by fear. You've got to be driven by the drive for success. And it was. I mean, I laugh with him still about it because I felt like it was one of those moments where someone dropped something on me, like, "Oh my God, you mean one day I'm going to be? Wait, what? What?" And sure enough, I think that's why, when it happened, it's a pisser, but it happens. And so refocus on, okay, so what's next? What is on the agenda? What's on the next docket? And you said earlier, your second career, your third career, start thinking about your life in steps of your career and where do you ultimately want to go?
That is an awesome piece of advice. And I think it's a great place to leave. So thank you so much for your time, Deanie. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
My listeners appreciate it. And I hope to see you soon and much continued success.
You've been listening to Pivot Points, a series designed to help ambitious women have the careers and lives of their dreams. To hear more interviews, go to www.yourcareeryourterms.com. And be sure to tell us what you think. If there are topics you'd like covered,